Welcome to All About Art. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an art historian, curator, and writer. Within this podcast, topics relating to art history, cultural policy, the art sector, as well as a large range of other art-related topics will be covered. Conducting critical discussions, having entertaining exchanges, or just enjoying some relaxing chats, All About Art is where you'll find it all. Join me in exploring and developing cultural discourse. Welcome to another episode of All About Art. This one is episode 50, and I sat down with Millie Jason Foster, director of Gillian Jason Gallery here in London. The gallery works with female-identifying artists, taking an intergenerational approach while presenting exhibitions about themes relevant in today's society. The gallery has a long history, with 40 years of experience in exhibiting work by artists from beyond the white male canon. Listen on to hear me ask Millie about running a gallery with her mother, Elli, as well as continuing her grandmother's legacy. We talk about her approach to supporting artists, and a tip from me in advance is that having a notepad to hand will be useful for this episode, because Millie shares so much of her expertise, giving structured advice to artists and explaining the way in which her strategic thinking benefits her business. She also talks about her background in investment banking, her approach to collecting, as well as more personal topics such as maintaining a work-life balance and making time for herself. Thank you, Millie, for coming on the podcast and sharing your amazing advice and expertise. Thank you to our sponsors at Synergy Associates, the art world tech gurus, for supporting this episode's production at their clubhouse on Pall Mall. You can find more about Synergy and their facilities in the show notes. Before I dive in, I wanted to let you lovely listeners know that All About Art is on Patreon. So if you want some behind-the-scenes content, maybe a bit of merch, the chance to get one-on-ones with me and my guests, or you're simply wanting to support this project, I would be absolutely thrilled if you decided to sign up. You can do so through the link in the show notes. I also wanted to say thank you to those who have already signed up. Your support means the world, and it makes the further production, improvement, and growth of the podcast possible. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful. And now, on to the interview. Welcome to the podcast, Millie.
Thank you.
I am so thrilled that we were able to get together for an episode. You are the director of Gillian Jason Gallery, a contemporary art gallery in London that focuses on art by women and non-binary artists. I want to start the episode off by asking you to delve into the interesting history of the gallery's intergenerational connections to the arts, starting off with who the gallery is named after, Gillian Jason.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm really pleased to be here. Gillian Jason is my grandmother, and I am hugely proud to run a gallery in her name. Gillian founded the gallery in the 1980s. She was a ballet dancer with the Royal Ballet, which is how she met my grandfather when he was performing in A Midsummer Night's Dream. So they have kind of a beautiful love story. They met very young. I know. They met very young. My grandmother was born and raised in Birmingham, and as she got older, every day, instead of turning right to go to school, she'd turn left to go to ballet school. So she had this extraordinary upbringing in the arts. And so after she had children, they were living in a house in Camden Town, and she decided that she didn't want to go back to dancing. And at the time, she had lots of friends who were in the London group and the Borough group and so on, and there was a big community of Jewish emigres, of which my parents were part of, my grandparents. And so she decided to open a gallery in their ground floor in their townhouse and deal in now what is modern British art. So my grandmother at the time was extraordinarily pioneering in what she was doing, insofar as she would exhibit husband and wives together. So David Bomberg, for example, she would always exhibit with his wife, Lillian Holt, who she helped to be acquired by the Tate in the 90s. So Gillian always had this extraordinary vision towards how women in the arts should be presented and represented. So when she retired a few years ago, my mother, Elli, and I decided to take on Gillian Jason Gallery and reopen it on Great Titfield Street with a view to solely championing art by women and bring the ideas that Gillian, my grandmother, had always championed into the 21st century.
Yeah, that actually brings me directly into my next question, because now that we know a bit more about the inception of Gillian Jason Gallery, could you tell me more about what your mission is today and why you decided to champion developing emerging artists' careers instead of, say, continuing fully in the secondary market?
There are a few reasons we decided to do that. Firstly, I'm one of 5 sisters, and with a huge female presence in my family. We're all aged between, my youngest is 15 all the way up to 35. So there's a huge range of us all trying to find our way as women today. And that's also really important to my mum, who is, helping and guiding us towards doing that. So when it came to where we'd put our focus, although we wanted to champion a lot of women that my grandmother had collected, dealt in, supported, championed, we decided actually that there are still so many women coming up into the art world today who not only need guidance on how to best take their career forwards, but also they need longevity in their career. And that's something that women in the past have not been afforded. So when we started dealing in art by women, we wanted to help guide careers straight from art school. And so instead of being extraordinarily fated at the beginning of their career and then, found at the end again with a lull in the middle, we want to help women have that stable trajectory all the way through. And I think that you can't just delve in with modern British art and dealing in the secondary market and say that you're championing women without giving a nod to today's contemporary issues.
Yeah. While you were answering my previous question, you spoke about not only exhibiting women artists, but also helping them develop their careers and further them. So in that same vein, I want to talk about art collecting, and I want to look at it from both an artist's perspective as well as a collector's point of view. What do you see is the biggest issue in that area of the sector today? And how can collectors and artists possibly go about navigating that to create kind of, a better sector and more like a healthier approach to it?
It's a really good question, and one that Elli and I delve into almost on a daily basis, not only when I'm talking to artists, but also talking to collectors, trying to strategize how we best support the artists that we represent. I think that there's an overarching theme that needs to be addressed, which is always how to unite artists and their work with collectors who really care about the themes and concepts that artists are talking about.
Yeah.
In this market, in the emerging market, for sure, there is a lot of speculation and a lot of risk taking.
Yeah, speculation can really harm an artist's career in the long term, can't it?
Totally. It's a huge issue. You have to make sure that prices don't go up too fast, or you don't have clients flipping works and so on. The crux of it, I see, is threefold. 1 is pricing, 2 is investment, and 3 is status. With pricing, delving into it on the artist side, it's a lot about, especially when they're coming out of art school, where do artists start? What is your baseline price for, a work that's a meter by meter? How does it work when it's smaller? How does it work when it's bigger? What medium are you painting in or creating? So there's a lot of market comparison that goes into how I look at where an artist should start with their pricing. And that market comparison also looks at trying to marry up works with collectors who really care about them. Something I always say that's really important when you're looking at how to price an artwork, you can't price it so high that you take yourself out of the running of being able to sell your work, but you can't price it so low as that it's no longer taken seriously.
Yeah.
And that little crux and turning point it's like a
little sweet spot.
It is. It's a sweet spot. I want to call it like the golden moment. That's what I want.
Or the golden ratio. Isn't
exactly.
That
yeah, the golden ratio. Let's add some art history in there. But then from the client side, and it really goes into that as well, from a collector side, what is reasonable? And, that's what we're going into before. When I'm pricing it for the artist, I also have to think about the collector. Who is their collector base going to be? What age are they? What are they trying to achieve by collecting the work and so on? Because if you price it incorrectly, you also might push a painting towards the wrong sort of clients. And that really goes into, point 2, which is all about investment.
Yeah.
Artists have to really look out for who they're selling to. And the problem is when you're very new, it's not your job. Your job is to paint. And the reason that the age-old relationship between artist and gallery, previously it was artist and patron, but now artist and gallery exists, is because artists should be the people who create the work, delve into that, and gallerists are the people who create a space for the work to be seen, marketed, and appreciated. And actually, when an artist tries to do everything, it's too stressful. I can't paint. There's a reason that, that line exists. I can make deals. I can, price an artwork. Ask me to draw a stick man and I'll do you a pretty good one. But beyond that, one of the reasons I'm in the art world is because I have a very process-driven brain, but I'm able to use that in an area where I can appreciate how other artists create. And every time I see a new artist go on a studio visit, I get to see the world from a whole different perspective. So going back to the point that artists need to paint and create, and that's what they're really there for. I'm using paint in really quite a loose term because, there's sculpture and there's a lot of things that go into that, a lot of different mediums. But going back to that point, it's about making sure that your work is at a price that won't be flipped.
Yeah.
Because you have to be sure as an artist, if you're not yet working with a gallery, who are you selling to? Who's on that list? Where are your paintings? Because when you come back in 5 or 10 years, you want to know where everything is. And that's really important. With flipping, we go through a lot of hoops to make sure that we know who our clients are. We know why our clients want to buy a painting. And ultimately, we know that that client is going to love it and not sell it in 6 months' time because they can get a good value on the secondary market.
Yeah.
With collectors, though, it's also an issue because you want to, I think especially young collectors, you want to find something that you love, but you want to find something that's also going to either maintain its value or at least increase a little bit. And I'm a big believer that you don't have everything forever. And a painting that you buy because it's important for you today is not necessarily so important to you in 5 years. You've got different issues, you've got a different outlook on life. So you have to be able to change up your collection, and you only have so much wall space as well. So you have to be able to change up your collection and say, okay, I've had this for 5 years. I will have this for a minimum of 5 years. How will that reflect in terms of value? Where is this artist going? And so going back to the point of collecting as an investment, that angle is really important and I don't think can be sidelined in this current art world, especially with emerging artists.
I think that your 3 points were like gold dust now for both artists and for collectors. So what did you have? You had pricing, you had investment, and then you had status.
So I've got a bit off track.
So are we going to come back to status?
We can come back to status.
Then, I don't want to interrupt you too much now. I just wanted to say that like this is so important, I think, as I said, for both sides. And like if an artist is listening in right now, then one of the key takeaways I think from this is find a gallerist or someone to work with that you can trust in that regard, that you feel like is on your same wavelength when it comes to that and has those interests, because I think that's so incredibly important for the longevity of your career. And if you're a gallerist listening in, or someone who's an emerging gallerist or someone who wants to go into that direction, then it's important to keep in mind that these are the things you need to focus on in order to push your artists' careers, in order to support not only them, but also the market and the sector in general. And I think all of these things are so important. We have this idea of like intrinsic value when it comes to our artworks and either what we own, what we love, or what artists create like for themselves. And I think that that's a very idealistic way of looking at it. But we boil it down, it's like we also as collectors look into, as you say, the investment side of things. Where is this artist going to be in 5 years? Where am I going to be in 5 years? How is this going to look? Because if you're spending, let's say, between a few £1,000s to a few tens of thousands of pounds to sometimes a few hundreds of thousands of pounds, depending on what level you're at as a collector, you're not going to want it just because it looks nice.
I totally agree. I think when you purchase a piece of art nowadays, not only does it have to look nice, but it has to resonate with you.
Yeah.
And in a market where there is so much artwork, so much to talk about, so many themes, concepts, socially important ideas emerging, you have to align yourself. Where does your passion lie? Mm-hmm. And which artwork speaks to you? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what your taste is. And sometimes I get collectors who say to me, well, can I buy an abstract piece and then can I buy a figurative piece? Like, what does that mean? Does it work in my home? And actually, when you have everything together and you can see it, it's your taste. It's your personality, and that all fits together. Yep. So when you're talking about purchasing artworks that are important, it doesn't matter what they look like as long as you love them and they resonate. And that's where the best art lies, actually. Yeah. Going back to a point you mentioned about artists and relationships with galleries, mm-hmm. What I often think about it is dating, actually. And if you think about it as dating, the way I like to do it is I do a few group shows with an artist before we decide whether we want to go any further with our dating life. And it enables an artist to see if they like working with the gallery and vice versa, because it's really important to have an equal relationship. And I've spoken to a lot of artists where they go, well, I just do what I'm told. And I don't think that always flies, and it shouldn't really be like that. If you did that in a relationship, people go, whoa, that's a little bit toxic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And actually you have to think about it as having your own autonomy. And if you think about it as a pyramid, you have the artist studio is the pinnacle. It's at the top, and everything comes below that. Because like I said in the beginning, gallerist, you might like art. You can't paint like the artist can. That is the true talent right there. So you start at the top of the triangle and then you come down. Yeah. So you have the artist, then you have the gallery, then you might have, art advisors who you work with and so on. So it begins to flow outwards, but everything comes from the artist at the top. The artist says, I'd like to paint 10 pieces. That's it. That's all I want. And the gallerist might say, please, could we have 15 because we need to fill the space, and we have 15 collectors and we think it's better for your career. And then you decide between you. It's a partnership. It's a relationship. And that's really important, because you also have to paint what you believe. And I've heard a lot of artists say, well, my gallerist told me that red paintings are better than blue paintings for me, so I'm just going to do red. And you have to be true to yourself, because otherwise those red paintings that you painted because it made you money that year, they're not the ones that are going to have longevity in your career, because eventually the artist will go, but I don't love red paintings. I love blue paintings. Yeah. So, on a very basic level, as much as that example was quite basic, I think it's good to have those basic examples, because it that way people can kind of take what they can from these very general, very like boiled down examples. It's important. It's important to talk about. Good, because I often explain it like that to artists as well, because I really support having a long-term relationship. And I think with artists, and I think the art world fares best with relationships. That's how it's built and that's how it's run, which is not always a good thing, actually. When it comes to my third point, which is status, if we want to go back to that. Yes. Because, so the three things I had, with art collecting were pricing, investment, and status. Mm-hmm. And we've gone over the first two, but status is something that really can bulldoze artists and collectors, new artists and new collectors, which is also why I work a lot in the emerging market, because it's something that needs a lot of work in terms of how to support the next generation. And so in terms of artists, status for me looks at who should that artist be selling to, which collections are going to be important for their careers, which collectors are going to be important for their careers. And in terms of that, what I mean is I always explain that an artist's CV is really important. And in this world, it is built up of where is your artwork based? Who has collected it? Which residencies have you gone on, and so on. But for the point of collecting, you have collectors who will love and support your work, and that circle becomes really important to you. Who is behind you with your concepts? Who is going to put you forwards to go on a residency? That group of collectors is really important. But that really leads on to my second point within status, which is collecting for those who are new to the art world. And those collectors, I think, have a really hard time a lot of the time, because when they might be trying to access a world outside of, their job in finance or consulting or law or whatever it is, when they want to have a creative outlet and they want to support artists that they love, they might go to art fairs and they say, hi, is this available? And a lot of the time I've seen, very emerging collector friends of mine just not even get the time of day, because they don't, in the gallery's eyes, have a CV and a roster of people they've collected before. So it becomes very chicken and egg, because a gallery will say, well, it's really important that we get this artist with this collector. Who do you have in your collection? And if you're just starting out, you go to the bottom of the list. So you also have to find your people as a collector. Which galleries want to work with you? Which galleries want to help you build a beautiful collection? And in that way, actually, you're also dating. You're the artist and the gallery's dating, but the gallery and the client are also dating. And that relationships, I think, are really important to then create a holistic ecosystem and putting those collectors and artists together to actually have the really valuable conversations.
I feel like throughout listening to you, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I had like a notepad. I want to take notes. I mean, this is my podcast, so obviously I've got this audio. So if I ever need to revert back to this, I can. But I feel like this was such a valuable and structured answer in looking at that and breaking that down into pieces that we can actually analyze and think about. Because we're kind of going in that more business-minded direction a little bit, I wanted to ask you how your background in investment banking and tech startups influences the way that you run your gallery. Because I'm sure it might, for people who don't know you, it might surprise listeners to hear that you have that background. But I'm sure that it must have an impact, no?
It definitely does have an impact. What is really wonderful is to be able to work with my mother, Elli, and to be co-directors together. Elli has a background in auction houses, used to work at Christie's before she then went into the film production world. And we as a team can really play to our strengths. So Elli has a huge creative brain and can visualize creatively with artists on studio visits what their artwork should look like, which direction they should be going in, how to develop their brushstrokes and so on. And that applies to the gallery as well. Where are we going? What shows are we going to put on? How are we going to curate this to our best ability? My strength in that partnership lies in process and structurally driven activities. So I feel very lucky to have a background in startups and investment banking, because I can do everything from stuff that I love that other people just loathe, VAT returns and accounting.
What is wrong with you? When you say VAT returns,
honestly,
I mean, spreadsheets is one thing, but VAT returns,
honestly, but actually, it is the core to running a business.
Yeah,
and a lot of people hate it, really loathe having to do those things, and I believe that no matter what I'm doing, no matter where the gallery goes, no matter how much time I have in the day, managing your finances is the only way to run a business.
Yeah.
And from my banking days, you know, I was there when Carillion, a big construction company, folded, and they were in the news a lot because it was about not paying people on time, not paying their suppliers, having a backlog, and things like cash flow. If you don't run it properly, you know, artists have it with their studio. You have to time paying your studio, paying for your studio rent. You have to time when you're going to buy new materials.
Yeah.
But you also have to manage when the gallery is going to pay you, because at the other side of it, the gallery is going, we have to time when we pay the artist. We have to time when we pay our rent. We have to time when we pay for shipping. And all of those things, if you don't have a brain that goes, okay, how am I going to fit all these puzzle pieces together? It falls really quickly.
Yeah.
So from my background in investment banking, it's been hugely helpful to learn from companies within the industry, how we functioned, but then also how to move that forward. So as much as it's boring, I think it's really important. And then on the other side of it was startups. When I left banking, I went to go and work for a tech startup for a year as chief of staff, and working directly with a CEO in a brand new company was hugely fast-paced, hugely rewarding, always messy. And I think that's how startups have to function. And when you're running a new gallery, you know, the name of Gillian Jason Gallery is an old one in London, but the idea and the rebrand towards focusing solely on female identifying artists is a new one. And so we have an old name with a startup mentality, and that has its positives and negatives. But on the positive side, working with a startup has enabled me to take a lot of those intricacies in terms of strategy and growth methods and apply it to a completely different industry.
Yeah. Oh man, I think that just sounds like you, like it, because we were talking about like there are positives and negatives to that, but like when you have this quite well-known name, like this established name within the art world in London, but then you have that new mentality. I think that actually, like in my personal opinion, not from a business point of view, but from an outsider's point of view, looking at the sector, I'm all for like developing the sector, innovation. I'm all for looking at things from a new perspective to then cater to new audiences or fit to the direction in which our society, in which the market, in which the art world in general is moving. And I think that sounds really good. Like I'm just feeling very inspired.
Oh, good.
On a personal note, because you mentioned it earlier, you run the gallery with your mother, Elli. How is that dynamic, may I ask? Not just from like the professional point of view with, you know, how you said that she has more of the creative brain and you have more of that analytical side. What's it like not only working with your mother, but like fully running that business and like having that on a personal level?
It's an excellent question, and actually one I get quite a lot, because I think most people go, oh, I could never work with my mother. And it's funny actually, because Elli talks about that a lot, because people say, you know, did you run the gallery with Gillian?
Yeah.
And Elli, I call her Elli at work and mum at home. And actually that's a point that I'll talk about. But Elli grew up in the gallery space. And she always complains. She says she used to come home and, you know, the beautiful artwork that she'd be looking at for 2 years on the wall would be gone. And she'd be like, where is it? I loved that piece. And grandma would say, well, do you want food on the table or you don't want food on the table? So, you know, and actually Elli always said she didn't want to do paperwork. And she saw how much paperwork my grandmother used to do. And so she just thought, you know, I'm going to go into the art world, perhaps work at Christie's for a bit, but I don't want to work with my mother. Elli still doesn't do paperwork. I do the paperwork. So she's managed to get away with that her whole life. But
I want to be like Elli when I grow up.
Me too, actually. Me too. No, she's fabulous. I love working with her, because before we started the gallery, we'd call each other every day and have a gossip. Now we call each other every day, do a little bit of work and have a gossip. So on a foundational level, our relationship hasn't really changed. We've always been very close. And I also think what works really well is that our skills are different. We can work in different areas of the business without clashing, without overlapping. And I think with that, it's important for any partnership in a startup, in a gallery, in, financial world, wherever you're working, you need to partner with someone who has different but complementary skills. So, sometimes we bicker, usually about if we like an artist or not, but actually we have similar tastes, similar ideas because, Elli raised me. So we have shared outlooks on life, which I think really help us run a business supporting art by women that is hopefully a successful one. And when we argue, actually, if we argue, we don't take that home. We have established very, I think, efficient ways to keep that separate. People often get confused because if I talk about mum at work, she's always Elli. And people go, who's Elli? Your mother? Why don't you just call her your mother?
Yeah.
But actually,
I noticed that you did that, and I kind of fully understood why you were doing that, like when you did that. And because I was like, yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense that you call her Elli. I think
it's a really important, a lot of people work with their romantic partner, and you have to be able to not take things home.
Yeah.
And so at work, she's Elli, at home, she's mum. And in my head, I've been able to, switch that on and off. We have different group chats on WhatsApp for work and different group chats on WhatsApp for family life, even down to the fact that Elli and I have a group chat. It's just me and her called GJG Business. So instead of going on our personal channel, we go on our work channel. And that in that way, we're able to completely differentiate. Am I talking to mum or am I talking to my business partner? And that's also really important to have in any business relationship when it goes outside of those realms as well.
Yeah, I think that that's really interesting and a really good piece of advice for anyone who is thinking about working with someone who is close to them on a personal level as well. So this is my penultimate question, and it's another personal one, but I know that you and I both struggle with this. How do you maintain a work-life balance? It's such like a typical question to ask, isn't it? But I'm sure that directing a gallery comes with commitments to artists, to collectors, to peers in the sector, as well as, of course, your personal life, to friends and family. What would be a tip that you would give someone from your toolkit to manage all of that?
I think it's important for me to start off by saying that I haven't always done it successfully. I've listened to so many of these podcasts and they go, well, I've always aced this. This is why I've aced my business. It's not the case. I have to really carefully manage my work-life balance because oftentimes in the past, I've gotten it really wrong. And on top of that, a lot of people today, we're connected all the time and on our phones. And that can give me a lot of social anxiety as well. So not only have I managed it incorrectly in the past, but also still today, I get social anxiety about going to 10 things in a week. It's stressful. You have to talk to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think people shouldn't be afraid to say that. And I think people shouldn't be afraid to share that side of how difficult it can be. In terms of how I try to manage it, I have to really carefully pick and choose what I go to. And people do it a lot of different ways. I know art advisors who don't want to go to the very swanky preview party with champagne and to talk to people. They go in the day when it's quiet because they just need to see the art. There are lots of different ways that people handle things. In terms of how I handle them, I have almost stopped completely working weekends. If I'm busy 4 to 5 nights a week going to openings, seeing people, visiting artists, having client dinners, if I'm doing all of that, I need time to switch off. So although, there might be an auction brunch on a Sunday or a late night opening on a Saturday, I have to be very strict with myself. When am I going to see my friends? When am I going to stay at home and do absolutely nothing? How am I going to stop getting FOMO? And that's a big thing as well.
A huge thing.
Huge.
I have it so bad.
And people get it badly as well, because if you're working to grow your own business, you need to be out there seeing as many people as possible and for them to be seeing your face.
Yeah.
But at some point, the FOMO has to stop, because if you do it at the weekends, if you do it 7 days a week, you'll burn out and then no one's going to see your face for 2 months. And I learned that the hard way. for sure, because if you are always go, 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 your body then tells you you need to stop. And that's just the way it is. So you have to be able to manage it. And the other thing is, you don't need to stay somewhere all night. My trick of the week, you only need to go to see the people you want to see. So before I go into a room, I say, okay, what am I here to do? What is my aim? If I don't have an aim and it's just for chatting, it's because I want to be social. Otherwise, what is my aim? Which pieces of artworks do I need to see? Which artists do I want to congratulate? Which collectors do I really want to touch base with because I haven't seen them in a while? Make those 3 to 5 aims. Once you're done, get out. Because otherwise, unless you're having fun, you're just going to burn out.
I think that I need to take a lot of that into my own way of doing things, because as I'm growing in my career as well, I'm getting invited to more things, and there are more events that I want to go to. And I've definitely not mastered taking the whole weekend off. I always work on Mondays. I mean, we're sitting here on a Monday recording a podcast because I have Sundays and Mondays off. So that's always the easiest way for me to do it. But I do try to do Sundays without as much as I possibly can, like without doing admin, without doing like art world things. But that's definitely something I need to work on. And then mindfully going into an event. I think that that's so good. And I'm going to start doing that, where I'm going to think about, who do I want to congratulate? Because I've definitely gone to places and like, okay, who do I want to see? Who do I want to congratulate? And then think about kind of safeguarding my own time and my own evening and my own rest, because it's so incredibly important. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
Finally, a fun question to end the episode. I ask all of the guests who come on the podcast, if you could pick one artist from art history to have dinner with, who would it be and why?
I knew you were going to ask me this question. And it's been a real struggle trying to decide. There are so many artists I could sit down with, but one that I actually want to highlight is someone called Evelyn de Morgan, who was a prolific painter at the end of the pre-Raphaelite period of art. It's not one that I deal in. It's not one that a lot of people talk about, but it's a period that I absolutely love for its breakaway from traditional Victorian era of painting, and for their, at the time, quite rebellious nature within the art world. But Evelyn de Morgan is one of the only women within the pre-Raphaelite movement. There are others, but I love not only her work, but who she was as a person. She was extraordinarily hardworking from the age of about 17. She completely shunned the idea of having to enter society. I think there's a quote somewhere that said that, if she was asked to come out into society, she would kick the queen. So there's all this kind of like, there are all these kind of great rebellious ideas around who she was. But later in life, she really took that into painting these extraordinarily beautiful kind of spiritualist and feminist scenes, extraordinarily detailed. She's someone who took an inordinate amount of time and effort into every single work that she produced of a beautiful woman from, Greco-Roman mythology or Shakespeare or another spiritualist idea of, tarot cards and things like that. But whatever she was producing, it always had something important to say. And her much later works, she took into the ideas of, she took into her pacifist ideas and started painting pieces that were representative of her campaign against the Boer War and then World War I and so on. And within all of this, she's a pre-Raphaelite woman, or she's a woman who was part of the pre-Raphaelite movement, who is only really in a very few UK institutions.
Yeah.
And when you look at the other pre-Raphaelite artists, Gabriel Rossetti, who just had, a big retrospective at the Tate, among other Rossettis in the family, or George Frederick Watts, who was a good friend of Evelyn de Morgan. They're so well known internationally the pre-Raphaelite movement. And this extraordinary female painter who was just as skilled is, not so well known. And she has her own foundation now, but is it on the same level? No. And that completely takes me back to what I'm doing today. So I would love to sit down with her to be able to talk about those ideas, talk about how she forged her path within the pre-Raphaelite movement.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I've learned about a new artist that I didn't know, which actually really upsets me, because when I first came to London, and it was 2017 and it was my first year at UCL, and they had us write an exhibition review, and they told us, this is how you do it. This is what you have to look at. And I went into the National Gallery because at that time they had an exhibition on the pre-Raphaelites. And do you think that for 1 second that she would have been in that show?
Nope.
No, it was all men. I only wrote about men. And this is something that, we're becoming increasingly more aware of. And it's such an important thing. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'll link the artist, or information to the artist, in the show notes so that people can go check her out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for coming
Thanks
on
for having me.
Podcast.
I've loved it.
And that is it for today on All About Art. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating or a review, as it helps more people discover the show. Also, feel free to share with your friends, or if you share on social media, tag me and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening.